Disrespect is never about hatred. It's about testing. Most people experience disrespect as an insult, a personal attack, a sign that something is wrong with them. But psychologically, disrespect is rarely emotional. It is investigative. When someone disrespects you, consciously or unconsciously, they are running a diagnostic. They are not asking who you are. They are asking something far more precise. Can I move you? This is the first illusion that must be broken. People do not disrespect strength. They audit it. Disrespect is not aggression aimed at dominance. It is uncertainty, searching for leverage. Before hierarchy is set, human beings test boundaries, the way animals test terrain. Not to destroy, to measure. Every act of disrespect contains a question. Sometimes it's subtle, a dismissive tone, a delayed response, a joke at your expense. Sometimes it's obvious, interruption, condescension, open challenge. But beneath every form is the same inquiry. How does this person react under pressure? The answer determines what happens next. This is why disrespect almost always appears before dominance is established, not after. Once hierarchy is clear, disrespect disappears. People do not poke what they believe is immovable. They poke what feels uncertain, and uncertainty is created not by weakness, but by emotional availability. Most people misunderstand this and make the fatal mistake. They react emotionally. They defend. They explain. They escalate. They take it personally. And in doing so, they answer the test incorrectly. They reveal where pressure works. The moment you react emotionally, the diagnostic completes itself. You have provided data. Your nervous system has shown movement, and movement signals leverage. This is why emotional reactions invite further disrespect, not because people are cruel, but because the system is now clear. If a small push produces a visible response, a larger push becomes tempting. If a boundary bends once, it will be tested again. Disrespect is reinforced not by intent, but by outcome. Think about it carefully. The people who are disrespected repeatedly are not always the weakest. They are often the most emotionally expressive, the most explainable, the most reactive. Their openness creates access. Their access invites experimentation. On the other hand, notice who rarely experiences disrespect. Not necessarily the loudest, not the most aggressive, but the ones who remain internally steady, the ones who do not rush to correct their tone, who do not explain themselves under pressure, who does not leak emotion when tested. These individuals are not feared, they are unavailable, and unavailability shuts down diagnostics immediately. This is the shift in identity that changes everything. You stop interpreting disrespect as a personal verdict and start reading it as a signal. A signal that hierarchy is undecided. A signal that someone is checking for emotional access. A signal that the interaction is still fluid and that your response will determine its shape. Once you see disrespect this way, it loses its emotional sting. You no longer feel compelled to defend your worth. You no longer need to prove strength. You understand that nothing has been lost yet, unless you give it away. Dominance is not established by punishing disrespect. It is established by withholding leverage, silence, restraint, calm presence. These do not win arguments. They end audits. When disrespect meets emotional stillness, confusion replaces confidence. The test yields no result. The system cannot complete its evaluation. And when evaluation fails, behavior adjusts. This is why trying to earn respect through explanation is always a losing strategy. Explanation assumes misunderstanding. Disrespect assumes testing. Treating a test like confusion hands the tester control. Treating it like data gathering removes incentive. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Many people are disrespected, not because they lack value, but because they are too accessible emotionally. Their reactions teach others how to treat them. Not once, but repeatedly. The moment you stop reacting to disrespect as an insult and start reading it as a diagnostic, your behavior changes automatically. You slow down, you observe, you respond or don't, based on position, not emotion, and that shift is felt immediately. This is the law governing every early interaction, whether spoken or silent. Disrespect is an attempt to locate emotional leverage. If leverage is found, disrespect escalates. If leverage is denied, disrespect disappears. From here forward, power is no longer about commanding respect. It is about never giving anyone the data they need to challenge you. And once that data is unavailable, dominance settles quietly, without confrontation, without force, and without ever needing to explain why. Before we go deeper, tap like and hit subscribe. Because this isn't about clapping back. It's about understanding what disrespect actually is. Not hatred. Not emotion. A test. And once you see it as a test, you stop reacting like a target and start responding like a reference point. Dominance is not decided by confidence, intelligence, social rank, or even physical presence. Those are surface markers. Long before the mind evaluates any of that, the nervous system has already chosen who leads and who adapts. Dominance is not a concept. It is a felt response. And the nervous system is the one doing the feeling. Every human interaction begins below language, before words are processed, before tone is interpreted, before intent is guessed. The nervous system scans for one thing: regulation. Who is stable? Who is reactive? Who is grounded? Who is leaking urgency? That scan happens instantly, and it sets hierarchy automatically. This is why dominance has nothing to do with aggression. Aggression is dysregulation. Raised voices, fast movements, emotional intensity. These signal internal instability, not power. They may intimidate temporarily, but they do not command long-term deference. Calmness does. Calmness signals authority faster than volume, because calmness tells the nervous system, this person is not being moved by the environment. And whoever is not being moved becomes the reference point. The moment one person remains internally steady, while another becomes reactive, the hierarchy is set. The reactive one adjusts. The steady one does not. This is where most people misunderstand dominance. They believe intensity equals strength, that passion, urgency, and force convey authority. But psychologically, intensity signals investment, and investment signals vulnerability. The more emotionally invested someone appears, the more their nervous system is open to influence. That openness lowers rank instantly. Emotional stability and emotional intensity are opposites in the hierarchy system. Stability communicates self-command. Intensity communicates reactivity. Even when intensity is framed as confidence, the nervous system reads it as movement. And movement always orbits stillness, never the other way around. This is why humans subconsciously follow the most regulated presence in any environment. In a crisis, people look to the calmest person. In conflict, attention shifts toward whoever remains composed. In groups, decisions tend to defer toward those who are least emotionally affected, not because they speak the most, but because their nervous system anchors the space. Dominance forms before words are processed, because the nervous system prioritizes safety and predictability over content. You can say all the right things, but if your body, tone, and pacing signal instability, the message loses authority. Conversely, someone can say very little, or nothing at all, and still dominate the interaction if their internal regulation is intact. This is why silence paired with calm is so powerful. Silence without regulation feels awkward. Silence with regulation feels deliberate. People sense the difference immediately. One invites intrusion, the other shuts it down. Notice how often people talk to manage their own nervous system rather than to communicate. They explain when they are uncomfortable. They feel silence when anxious. They react when provoked. These behaviors are attempts to restore internal balance through external expression. But every time balance is outsourced, dominance is surrendered. Emotionally regulated individuals do the opposite. They stabilize internally first. They let discomfort exist without discharging it. They pause before responding. They do not allow the environment to dictate their internal state. That discipline is felt immediately, and it reorders hierarchy without effort. This is why dominance often appears effortless from the outside. It is not achieved through force. It is achieved through containment. Others feel it as certainty, as groundedness, as something solid they unconsciously orient around. The affirmation here is not motivational. It is neurological. Stabilize internally before responding. Let your nervous system settle before your words move. Do not outsource regulation to reaction. When you do this consistently, something irreversible happens. People stop testing as aggressively. Disrespect loses momentum. Conversations are slow. Pressure weakens, not because you asserted control, but because control was already present internally. Hierarchy does not require announcement. It forms automatically around regulation, and this law governs every interaction, whether subtle or overt. The calmest nervous system sets the hierarchy, not the loudest, not the fastest, not the most expressive, the calmest. From here forward, dominance is no longer something you try to establish. It is something your nervous system communicates before you ever say a word. Disrespect does not begin with cruelty. It begins with observation. People rarely decide to disrespect you consciously. What they do instead is test, watch your response, and adjust their behavior based on what your reaction teaches them. This is why disrespect often feels confusing. You didn't do anything wrong, but something in how you reacted gave permission. Reactivity lowers perceived rank because it signals emotional accessibility. The moment you react, especially emotionally, you reveal that the other person can move you. And once movement is detected, hierarchy shifts. The person who causes the movement is subconsciously placed above the one who responds to it. This is not moral, it is neurological. The nervous system reads emotional reactivity as instability, and instability is always ranked lower than containment. This is where most people sabotage themselves. When they feel disrespected, they believe reacting is self-respect. They explain, they defend, they escalate, they raise their voices, they justify their position. All of these feel like standing up for yourself. But psychologically, they do the opposite. They communicate that the disrespect worked, that it reached you, that it triggered a need to correct, prove, or restore status verbally. Explanation backfires because it reframes the interaction as a negotiation. The moment you explain yourself emotionally, you place the other person in the judge position. You are no longer standing as a reference point. You are responding to an audit. Defensiveness makes this even worse. It tells the observer that their opinion matters enough to destabilize you. Escalation adds intensity, but intensity is not authority. It is urgency, and urgency signals loss of control. This creates the loop most people never see. First comes the test, then comes the reaction, then comes escalation. Then comes loss of authority. Once this loop is completed even once, the brain of the other person learns something critical. This person can be moved. And once that lesson is learned, disrespect doesn't stop. It increases. Not because the other person is evil, but because the interaction has taught them that pushing produces results. Emotional display versus emotional control is the core distinction here. Display says, I need you to see how I feel. Control says, my internal state is not available to you. The first invites influence. The second shuts it down. Display feels honest, but honesty without containment is exposure. Control feels restrained, but restraint is what preserves authority. This is why silence is so disruptive to disrespect. Silence breaks the loop. When a test is met with non-reaction, the expected pattern collapses. There is no emotional data to feed on, no escalation to mirror, no defensiveness to exploit. The disrespect has nowhere to land. And when it doesn't land, the brain of the instigator experiences uncertainty. Did that work? Did I misjudge? Should I push again? Most don't push again because uncertainty carries risk. Silence shifts pressure back onto the person who initiated the test. They are forced to regulate themselves instead of feeding off your response. Over time, this retrains behavior, not through confrontation, but through absence of reward. If this is hitting you, tap like and hit subscribe, because most people keep losing respect in the same way. They treat a diagnostic like an insult, and they answer it with emotion. In the next part, you'll see the 3 responses that end audits instantly: silence, restraint, and calm presence. And why they don't fight disrespect. They make it unprofitable. And this is the identity transition that changes everything, moving from reactive participant to grounded observer. The reactive participant experiences every interaction as something happening to them. They respond instinctively, emotionally, and reflexively. The grounded observer experiences interactions as data. They watch tone, timing, intent. They respond only when the response serves their position. Grounded observers don't rush to correct misunderstandings. They don't explain themselves to regain comfort. They don't escalate to reclaim pride. They let silence do the sorting. They allow disrespect to expose itself instead of fighting it. And because they don't supply emotional energy, disrespect loses momentum naturally. This does not mean passivity. It means containment. Silence is not avoidance. It is refusal to engage on unequal terms. When speech returns, it returns cleanly, briefly, factually. No emotion leaked, no defense offered, no urgency displayed. That contrast alone reorders the interaction. People learn how to treat you by what works on you. If reactions work, they will be used again. If silence meets disrespect, behavior adjusts. Over time, people stop testing not because you demanded respect, but because your nervous system taught them that testing is unproductive. This is the law that governs the entire dynamic. Reactivity is permission to be tested again. Remove the permission, and the behavior disappears. Not through force, not through argument, but through internal stillness. Disrespect cannot survive where reaction is unavailable. Dominance is one of the most misunderstood dynamics in human interaction. Most people associate it with intimidation, volume, aggression, or force. They believe dominance must be performed, asserted loudly, defended verbally, reinforced repeatedly. But real dominance does not announce itself. It forms quietly, often without a single confrontation, and it stabilizes long before anyone consciously recognizes it. Dominance does not require intimidation, because intimidation is reactive. It needs resistance to exist. The moment you have to intimidate someone, you are already responding to a challenge. True dominance prevents challenges from arising in the first place. It does this not through threat, but through emotional inaccessibility. When people sense they cannot move you internally, they stop trying to move you externally. This is where restraint becomes an invisible boundary. You do not need to state boundaries when your nervous system enforces them automatically. Emotional containment, the ability to feel without leaking, creates a perimeter others intuitively respect. People may not consciously understand why they hesitate, soften their tone, or choose their words carefully around you, but they feel it. Their nervous system detects stability and adapts. Unreadability plays a central role here. Disrespect thrives on information. When people can read your emotions, anticipate your reactions, or predict your behavior, they feel safe testing limits. But when your internal state is opaque, when there is no clear signal of irritation, fear, eagerness, or insecurity, testing becomes risky. Unreadability removes the reward structure that disrespect depends on. There is no emotional feedback loop to exploit. This is why disrespect stops automatically around emotionally contained individuals. Not because those individuals demanded respect, but because disrespect found no entry point. Attempts to provoke fall flat. Jokes don't land. Pushes don't produce movement. The absence of reaction communicates something stronger than words ever could. There is no access here. Watch how people adjust their behavior around someone like this. Conversations slow down. Interruptions decrease. Tone becomes more deliberate. Requests become more careful. Even disagreements lose their sharp edges. None of this is commanded. It emerges. People regulate themselves because they sense an imbalance they cannot control. And the safest response is caution. This is dominance as presence, not performance. Performance requires energy, maintenance, and constant reinforcement. Presence requires none of that. It is embodied. It shows up in how you pause before speaking, how you listen without urgency, how you don't rush to fill silence, how you allow others to reveal themselves fully without interrupting or correcting. Presence is felt, not argued. Calm, silence, and non-reaction work together here as a single system. Calm stabilizes your internal state. Silence prevents unnecessary exposure. Non-reaction removes emotional leverage. Together, they create a gravitational center. Others orient around it, not because they are forced to, but because unregulated systems naturally move toward regulation. Importantly, this form of dominance is non-aggressive. There is no hostility in it, no coldness for the sake of cruelty, no power games being played outwardly. The dominance is internal first. External hierarchy simply reflects what has already been decided at the nervous system level. This is why people often say, "I don't know why, but I take this person seriously." They are responding to regulation, not rhetoric. Integration is what makes this permanent. Calm is not an act you turn on. Silence is not something you weaponize occasionally. Non-reaction is not suppression. These are baseline traits of someone who has mastered internal containment. When integrated, you no longer think about dominance. You simply occupy it. And because there is no performance, there is nothing to challenge. This is the final shift most people never make. They try to look dominant instead of becoming emotionally inaccessible. They try to sound authoritative instead of regulating themselves. They focus on behavior instead of nervous system state. And as a result, they keep fighting battles that never needed to exist. The law underneath all of this is simple and absolute. Dominance emerges where emotional access ends. When people cannot reach inside you, cannot rush you, guilt you, provoke you, or destabilize you, hierarchy settles naturally. No confrontation, no explanation, no escalation, just presence, and presence always wins. At the highest level of dominance, something subtle but irreversible happens. You stop defending your position in the social hierarchy, and you start embodying it. This is the moment power stabilizes. Not because others granted it to you, but because your internal state no longer seeks confirmation. You are no longer reacting to the room. The room is reacting to you. Most people spend their lives defending status. They justify decisions. They explain boundaries. They react to disrespect. They escalate when challenged. All of these behaviors come from the same psychological root: uncertainty about position. When someone is unsure where they stand, they try to prove it. And the moment you try to prove power, you signal that it is not settled. Dominant individuals do not do this. They do not defend status, because status is not something they are trying to win. It is something they are anchored in. This is the shift from performance to embodiment, from behavior to being, from asking, "How am I being seen?" to knowing, "I am the reference point." This is why dominant people are rarely challenged, not because others are afraid of them, but because there is nothing to challenge against. Challenges require movement. They require emotional friction. They require visible openings. But when someone is internally still, emotionally contained, and behaviorally consistent, there is no surface to push against. Attempts to disrupt simply collapse under their own weight. Let's recap the laws that brought you here. Disrespect is not random. It is diagnostic. It is an attempt to locate emotional leverage. People test before they submit to hierarchy. They probe reactions, tone shifts, explanations, and defensiveness. The moment they detect emotional movement, the testing escalates. Dominance is decided by the nervous system, not by words. Humans subconsciously rank based on regulation. The calmest nervous system in the room sets the hierarchy. Volume, intensity, and confidence displays do not override stability. They reveal its absence. Reactivity trains disrespect. Every emotional reaction teaches others how to treat you. Explanations invite judgment. Defensiveness invites pressure. Escalation invites competition. Silence and restraint break the cycle by removing feedback. Dominance forms without confrontation when emotional access ends. When people cannot move you internally, they stop trying to move you externally. Tone shifts, behavior adjusts, respect emerges quietly. And now, at the final stage, dominance becomes self-sustaining. This is where identity locks in. Dominant individuals move differently, not dramatically, but deliberately. Their walking pace is unhurried, not slow for effect, but steady, because there is no internal rush. Their pauses are intentional. They do not rush to respond, not because they are calculating, but because their nervous system is not hijacked by urgency. Silence does not threaten them. It works for them. They speak less, but every word lands heavier. Not because the words are clever, but because there is no emotional leakage attached to them. No need to persuade, no need to convince. Speech becomes a tool, not a reflex. They decide cleanly, not impulsively, and not anxiously. Decisions are made without over-explaining. When they say yes, it stands. When they say no, it does not wobble. There is no emotional residue left behind for others to manipulate. This is why dominant people rarely explain themselves. Explanation implies evaluation. It places others in the judge position. But when authority is embodied, there is nothing to defend. Actions speak. Consistency speaks. Stillness speaks. Notice something important here. This form of power never escalates. It does not argue. It does not compete. It does not chase respect. It does not correct every misunderstanding. It does not rush to be seen accurately. It allows time to do the work. Time dissolves false narratives. Stability outlasts noise. This is why dominant individuals are rarely involved in drama. Drama requires emotional hooks. It requires reactions. It requires mutual escalation. When one side refuses to move emotionally, the drama starves. Over time, people begin orienting around you differently. They check themselves before speaking. They think before crossing boundaries. They hesitate before disrespecting. Not because you threatened them, but because their nervous system learned that nothing is gained by testing you. You become the reference point. A reference point does not need validation. Others calibrate against it automatically. In physics, reference points are fixed. Everything else moves relative to them. In psychology, it's the same. When you are emotionally unmovable, socially consistent, and behaviorally restrained, others adjust to you. This is the deepest form of dominance available to a human being. It is quiet, it is stable, and it is almost invisible to those who don't understand it. The final truth is this: authority is not asserted, it is assumed. The moment you stop asserting it, it arrives. And this is where the dark psychology protocol locks in. You are no longer reacting to disrespect. You are reading it. You are no longer proving dominance. You are embodying it. You are no longer defending your position. You are the position. Hold this identity, not as an act, not as a tactic, but as a baseline state. Because once you become the reference point, power no longer moves around you. It moves from you. If this changed how you read disrespect, tap like and hit subscribe. And comment this: I don't react to tests. Because the moment you stop giving emotional data, disrespect stops being a problem you solve and becomes a signal you observe. No confrontation, no explanation, just leverage denied.